The diplomatic station hung like a giant metal flower in the darkness of space, its gleaming surfaces reflecting the light of the distant star Kepler 442. For 6 long months, this place had been home to the most important talks in galactic history. Inside the main conference hall, tensions had grown thicker than the recycled air that kept everyone breathing. Admiral Jake Morrison sat at the polished table, his weathered hands folded in front of him as he listened to yet another demand from the alien delegation. His gray hair was cut short in military fashion, and his blue eyes held the patience of a man who had seen too many battles to get excited by mere words. Around him sat the other human representatives, each one carefully chosen for this moment that would decide humanity's future among the stars. Dr. Lisa Hamilton adjusted her glasses and made another note on her tablet. As the chief negotiator, she had spent countless hours trying to find common ground with the 12 alien species that made up the Galactic Council. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and dark circles under her eyes showed how little sleep she had gotten lately. She had believed, truly believed, that peace was possible between humans and the rest of the galaxy. Across the table, Prime Minister Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire clicked his mandibles in what humans had learned was a sign of impatience. His insect-like features were hard to read, but his tone made his feelings clear. The purple exoskeleton that covered his tall frame gleamed under the conference room lights. Next to him sat Chancellor Crix of the Altarian Republic, whose blue-scaled skin shifted color slightly when he was annoyed, which seemed to be most of the time during these talks. "The terms are not open for discussion," Veltar said, his translator making his words sound mechanical. "Humanity must accept these conditions if you wish to join civilized galactic society." Morrison looked down at the document in front of him. The list of demands was long and insulting. Humans would have to surrender 80% of their military fleet to alien oversight. Every human colony would be subject to inspection and control by alien administrators. Earth itself would have population limits enforced by alien monitors. Human expansion into new systems would require permission from the Galactic Council. "These are not terms for membership," Dr. Hamilton said carefully. "These are terms for surrender." Chancellor Crix's scales shifted to a darker blue. "Your species has shown nothing but aggression since you discovered faster-than-light travel. You expand without permission. You build weapons without restraint. You must be contained before you become a threat to peaceful species." Morrison felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. "We have never attacked another species without provocation. Every world we have settled was uninhabited. Every weapon we have built has been for defense." "Defense?" Veltar's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "You call your fleet defensive? Your warships carry enough firepower to destroy entire planets." "As do yours," Morrison replied. "The difference is we have never used that power against innocent civilians." The Meridian representative, a tall being with silver skin and no visible mouth, spoke through a device attached to its throat. "Human history shows constant warfare among your own kind. How can we trust a species that cannot even make peace with itself?" Dr. Hamilton leaned forward. "Human history also shows our capacity for growth, for learning from our mistakes. We ended our global wars centuries ago. We united our planet in peace. Only because you found new targets among the stars," Chancellor Crix said with contempt. The accusation hung in the air like a physical blow. Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. These beings had already made up their minds about humanity. Nothing he or Dr. Hamilton said would change their opinion. "We have offered to share our medical advances," Dr. Hamilton continued, her voice showing strain. "Our agricultural techniques have increased food production on 17 worlds. Our communication networks have connected distant systems. Our merchant ships carry goods across the galaxy. We have tried to contribute, to be partners. You have made yourselves useful," admitted the Nexus Federation representative, a being that looked like a walking tree with too many eyes. "But usefulness is not the same as trustworthiness. A tool can be helpful until it decides to cut the hand that wields it." Morrison stood up slowly. The movement was smooth and controlled, but every alien in the room suddenly paid attention. "Let me understand this clearly," he said. "You want us to disarm ourselves, submit to your authority, and limit our growth. In exchange, you will allow us to exist as junior partners in your galactic community." "That is correct," Veltar said. "These are generous terms for a species as dangerous as yours. And if we refuse?" Chancellor Crix spread his scaled hands. Then you remain isolated, cut off from galactic society. Your expansion will be blocked. Your ships will be turned away from civilized systems. You will have chosen to be enemies of peace. Dr. Hamilton tried one more time. Surely we can find a middle ground. Mutual security arrangements, cultural exchanges, trade agreements that benefit everyone. The terms are final, Veltar said with finality. Your species will accept containment, or face the consequences of your aggression. Morrison looked around the table at his fellow humans. Colonel Patricia Wells, the military advisor, had her hand clenched in a fist. Ambassador Kevin Roberts was shaking his head slowly. Dr. Hamilton was staring at her notes as if they might magically reveal a solution that did not exist. You call us aggressive, Morrison said quietly. You call us dangerous. You call us untrustworthy. He gathered his papers and stood. You know what you have not called us? The aliens waited. Partners, equals, friends. Morrison's voice grew stronger. For 6 months we have sat at this table trying to build something together. We offered our technology, our resources, our friendship. We came here believing that different species could work together, could create something better than any of us could build alone. He walked toward the door, and the other humans rose to follow him. Where are you going? Chancellor Crix demanded. Morrison stopped and turned back. We came here in good faith. We offered cooperation, mutual defense, shared prosperity. Instead, you offer us chains dressed up as friendship. He met each alien gaze in turn. Consider these negotiations ended. You cannot survive alone. Veltar's voice rose to a screech. You need the galaxy more than it needs you. Morrison paused at the airlock leading to the human ship. We have been alone among the stars for 300 years. We survived, we grew, we prospered. He smiled, but the expression held no warmth. We are very good at being alone. As the humans filed through the airlock, Chancellor Crix called after them. You will regret this decision. Within a year you will come crawling back begging for the mercy we have offered today. The airlock sealed with a soft hiss. Through the thick transparasteel window, the aliens could see Admiral Morrison one last time as he spoke to his aide. His words were lost to the vacuum of space, but his meaning was clear enough. Humanity was walking away, and the galaxy was about to learn what that really meant. 3 weeks after the humans walked away from the peace talks, the galaxy began to feel like something was missing. At first it was small things that most beings barely noticed. Messages took longer to arrive. Shipments were delayed. Computer systems ran a little slower than usual. Commander Ryan Brooks stood in the control room of Relay Station Alpha 7, watching his technicians shut down the massive communication array for the last time. The station had been humanity's gift to the galaxy, a network of quantum transmitters that allowed instant communication across impossible distances. The aliens had called it crude human engineering, even as they used it every day to run their governments and businesses. Sir, the Zephyrian Empire is requesting an explanation for the communication delays, said Lieutenant Carol Martinez, as she monitored incoming messages. Tell them to ask their own engineers, Brooks replied. We are no longer responsible for maintaining their infrastructure. The lieutenant nodded and began typing the response. Around the station, human technicians were packing up equipment and preparing for evacuation. The aliens had made it clear that human technology was unwelcome in civilized space. Now they would learn what the galaxy looked like without it. Across the sector, Captain Amanda Foster was overseeing a different kind of withdrawal. Her cargo fleet had been moving goods between star systems for over a decade, using human jump drive technology that was faster and more efficient than anything the aliens had developed. The ships could carry 3 times more cargo than alien vessels and make the journey in half the time. Captain, we are receiving urgent requests from the Meridian Trade Authority, reported her navigator, Lieutenant Tony Rodriguez. They want to know when our next supply run will arrive at their colonies. Foster looked at the list of contracts on her screen. Food supplies for 12 worlds, medical equipment for 6 systems, raw materials for hundreds of factories. The aliens had become dependent on human logistics without even realizing it. Send them our standard message, she said. All human cargo operations have been suspended indefinitely. The message was simple and polite, but its meaning was clear. The humans were done carrying the galaxy's burdens. On the agricultural world of Centauri Prime, Director Kevin Shaw walked through fields of golden grain that stretched to the horizon. The crops were the result of human agricultural science, techniques that had taken thousands of years to develop on Earth and centuries more to adapt to alien worlds. The local Nexus Federation administrators had always complained that human farming methods were too complicated, too different from traditional alien approaches, sir. The local authorities are demanding that we leave our equipment and continue the harvest, said Dr. Patricia Moore, his head researcher. Shaw looked at the vast automated harvesters that had tripled crop yields on 17 worlds. The machines were marvels of human engineering, designed to work in any environment with any soil type. Without them, the alien colonists would face massive food shortages. Our contract was terminated when the peace talks ended, Shaw said calmly. We have no obligation to continue working here. Dr. Moore nodded and activated her communicator. All human agricultural teams begin immediate evacuation procedures. Leave nothing behind. The order was repeated across the galaxy. On mining worlds, human engineers shut down extraction operations that had been running flawlessly for years. On research stations, human scientists packed up their experiments and data. On medical centers, human doctors finished treating their current patients and then quietly left. Dr. Susan Taylor had been running the Human Medical Exchange Program for 5 years. Her teams had developed treatments for diseases that had plagued alien species for centuries. The breakthrough cure for meridian wasting syndrome had come from human research. The treatment for Zephyrian shell rot was based on human medicine. Dozens of other conditions had been solved by human doctors working alongside alien patients. Doctor, the Altarian Health Ministry is threatening legal action if we abandon our posts, said Nurse Jennifer Cooper. Taylor looked at her medical files. Thousands of alien patients whose lives depended on human medical knowledge. It hurt to leave them. But the choice had been made by their governments, not by her. We offered our knowledge freely, she said quietly. Their leaders chose to reject it. Recall all medical teams immediately. The effects began showing up almost right away. Communication delays that had been measured in minutes now stretched into hours and then days. Without human relay stations, messages sent from one end of the galaxy to the other could take weeks to arrive. Governments that had relied on instant communication with their colonies suddenly found themselves isolated from their own territories. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for years began to break down. Without human cargo ships, there simply was not enough shipping capacity to move goods efficiently. Prices began to rise as supply shortages appeared on world after world. Factories shut down for lack of raw materials. Colonies ran short of essential supplies. On Nexus Prime, the Federation Council held an emergency session to discuss the growing crisis. The tree-like beings had always prided themselves on their logical approach to problems. But this situation seemed to have no logical solution. Our communication networks are failing, reported the Minister of Information. Without human relay stations, we cannot coordinate with our outer colonies. Our food production has dropped by 60%, added the Minister of Agriculture. The human farming techniques were apparently more important than we realized. The council leader rustled his branches in frustration. Surely we can replace their services with our own technology. We have tried, said the Minister of Technology. Our best estimates suggest it will take years to develop alternatives and decades to implement them across our territory. Similar conversations were happening in government buildings across the galaxy. The Meridian Union discovered that their computer networks had been dependent on human-designed software that no one else knew how to maintain. The Altarian Republic found that their interstellar shipping industry was collapsing without human cargo vessels. The Zephyrian Empire realized that their colonies were running out of food without human agricultural support. Chancellor Crix of the Altarian Republic stood in his office looking out at the capital city below. The streets that had once bustled with activity were noticeably quieter. Shops were closing due to supply shortages. The mood of the population was growing darker each day. Sir, we have another report from the outer colonies, said his aide, Secretary Bill Thompson. They are requesting immediate food shipments. Without human agricultural teams, their crop yields have fallen by 70%. Crix felt his scales shift to an angry red color. Contact the Meridian shipping companies. Surely they can provide transport. Sir, the Meridian ships are not equipped with human jump drive technology. A journey that took human ships 3 days now takes our vessels 2 weeks. By the time the food arrives, it will be spoiled. The Chancellor turned away from the window. When he had dismissed the humans as primitive, he had never imagined how much his civilization had come to depend on their crude technology. The humans had integrated themselves into galactic society so smoothly, that no one had noticed how essential they had become. Prime Minister Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire was having similar realizations. His homeworld was facing shortages of everything from medical supplies to basic consumer goods. The human trade networks had connected his empire to resources across the galaxy. Without those connections, his people were beginning to suffer. The humans have cut off all communication, his communication minister reported. Our diplomatic messages are not being answered. Veltar clicked his mandibles in frustration. They are trying to pressure us into accepting their demands. But deep down he was beginning to suspect that the humans were not coming back. They had built their own civilization without galactic help for hundreds of years. They had colonies, resources, technology, and everything they needed to remain independent. It was the galaxy that needed them, not the other way around. As the days passed and the shortages grew worse, a terrible truth began to dawn on the alien leaders. They had not been negotiating with primitive barbarians begging for acceptance. They had been threatening the very people who kept their civilization running smoothly, and now those people were gone. 6 months after humanity walked away from the peace talks, the galaxy was burning. What had started as minor inconveniences had become a disaster that threatened every civilized world. Communication networks had collapsed, trade routes were broken, and entire colonies were starving. The careful balance that had kept the galaxy peaceful for generations was crumbling like a house built on sand. Fleet Admiral Korth of the Hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as another alien world surrendered to his forces. The Hegemony had remained neutral during the peace talks, content to watch from the shadows as the other species argued about containing humanity. Now, with the galaxy weakened and divided, Korth saw his chance to reshape everything according to his vision. The Hegemony ships were dark and angular, built for war rather than exploration. Their crews were soldiers who believed that strength was the only law worth following. For centuries, they had been held in check by the combined forces of the Galactic Council, but with communication networks down and supply lines broken, the Council could no longer coordinate a defense against Hegemony aggression. Admiral, the Nexus Federation colony on Titan 7 has agreed to our terms, reported his tactical officer, a scarred veteran named Commander Vex. They will provide tribute in exchange for protection. Korth smiled, showing teeth that had been sharpened to points. Excellent. What is the status of our next target? The Meridian mining world of Kepler Prime. Their defenses are minimal, and they have received no reinforcements from their homeworld. The Admiral nodded with satisfaction. Without human early warning systems, the Meridian Union could not detect Hegemony fleets until they were already in orbit around their colonies. Without human communication networks, they could not call for help fast enough to matter. Without human defensive partnerships, they had no allies close enough to respond in time. On Earth, General Nathan Cross stood in the war room deep beneath the Pentagon, studying reports from across the galaxy. Intelligence satellites positioned at the edge of human space were monitoring the chaos spreading through alien territory. The information painted a grim picture of civilizations in collapse. The Meridian Union has lost 6 colonies to Hegemony forces, reported Colonel Sandra Williams, his intelligence chief. Their government is requesting emergency aid. What about the Zephyrian Empire? Cross asked. Internal rebellion on 4 worlds. Their economy has contracted by 60%. Prime Minister Veltar has been forced to declare martial law on his homeworld. Cross studied the holographic display showing Hegemony fleet movements. The enemy was being methodical, taking one system at a time and consolidating their gains before moving to the next target. They were following classic military doctrine, but they were doing it against opponents who could no longer mount an effective defense. Sir, we have received another communication from President Carter, said Major Tony Martinez. She wants an updated assessment of the galactic situation. Cross nodded grimly. President Helen Carter had been asking the same question every day for weeks. The answer was always the same, but it kept getting worse. The galaxy was tearing itself apart, and the beings who had rejected humanity's friendship were now facing the consequences of their pride. In the White House Situation Room, President Carter sat across from her advisors, listening to yet another report about alien suffering. Secretary of State Daniel Hayes was arguing for immediate humanitarian intervention, while Secretary of Defense Robert Nash counseled patience. Madam President, we cannot simply watch while entire populations starve, Hayes said earnestly. Our medical supplies could save millions of lives. Our food shipments could prevent famine on dozens of worlds. And what message does that send? Nash countered. They rejected us, insulted us, and demanded our surrender. Now they expect us to rescue them from their own mistakes? Carter looked at the report spread across the table. Images of alien refugees fleeing hegemony attacks. Data showing food shortages that would soon become full-scale famines. Communication intercepts revealing the desperation of alien leaders who could no longer govern their own territories effectively. What does Admiral Morrison recommend? She asked. Nash consulted his notes. The Admiral believes we should maintain our current position. His exact words were, "Let them understand what they threw away." He points out that any aid we provide now will be seen as weakness, not compassion. Dr. Susan Taylor, the former head of the Medical Exchange Program, spoke up from her position as Special Advisor on Alien Affairs. Madam President, I have monitored communications from 17 alien medical facilities. They are facing outbreaks of diseases that human medicine had under control. Children are dying from conditions we could easily treat. The weight of command had never felt heavier to Carter. Every decision carried the fate of billions of beings, both human and alien. She had to balance humanity's long-term interests against the immediate suffering of former enemies. On Luna, Dr. Lisa Hamilton worked late into the night at the Intelligence Monitoring Station, tracking alien communications across the galaxy. Her job was to listen to the desperate messages flowing between alien governments and translate them for human leadership. What she heard broke her heart. "Central Command, this is Monitoring Station Alpha," she said into her communicator. "I have new intelligence from the Zephyrian sector." The voice of Colonel Patricia Wells came back immediately. "Go ahead, Doctor." The hegemony has launched a full-scale assault on Zephyria Prime. Their orbital defenses have been compromised. Prime Minister Veltar is requesting immediate evacuation assistance. There was a long pause before Wells responded. "Any indication that other alien forces are moving to assist?" Hamilton checked her screens, which showed the positions of every major fleet in the galaxy. "Negative. The Altarian Republic is dealing with civil unrest on 3 worlds. The Meridian Union has recalled all ships to defend their core systems. The Nexus Federation is in complete communication blackout." The truth was becoming clear to everyone who was paying attention. The Galactic Council had been destroyed not by human weapons, but by human absence. The aliens had built their civilization on the foundation of human services and then kicked away that foundation in a fit of pride and prejudice. Admiral Morrison received the intelligence report while aboard the UES Independence, humanity's most advanced battleship. The vessel was one of hundreds that had been secretly upgraded during the months of failed negotiations. Human engineers had used the time to develop new technologies, knowing that peaceful coexistence was unlikely. "Sir, we are receiving emergency broadcasts from Zephyria Prime," reported Captain Amanda Foster, who had been transferred from cargo operations to military command. "The planet's population is under direct attack." Morrison studied the tactical display showing hegemony forces in orbit around the Zephyrian homeworld. The enemy had brought enough firepower to reduce the planet's surface to molten rock. This was not conquest, it was genocide. "What are our orders from Earth?" he asked. "Stand by and monitor," Foster replied. "No direct intervention unless authorized by the President." Morrison felt the weight of command pressing down on him. For 6 months he had watched alien civilization crumble while humanity remained safely isolated. He had told himself that the aliens deserved whatever happened to them. But watching genocide unfold was different from watching economic collapse. On Zephyria Prime, Prime Minister Veltar huddled in an underground bunker as hegemony bombardment shook the planet's surface. The being who had once dismissed humanity as primitive barbarians now faced extinction at the hands of a truly barbaric enemy. His homeworld was burning, his people were dying, and no help was coming from his former allies. His communication officer, one of the few government officials still alive, managed to establish a weak signal to the human embassy on Proxima Station. The message was simple and desperate. "We were wrong," Veltar transmitted, his proud voice reduced to a whisper. "Please help us." The message reached Ambassador Grace Johnson at the human embassy, which had remained operational even after the peace talks failed. She stared at the transmission for a long moment, remembering the arrogant insect who had demanded humanity's surrender just months earlier. Johnson forwarded the message to Earth with a single comment attached. "The chickens have come home to roost." But even as she sent the transmission, she felt a deep sadness. The galaxy was learning a terrible lesson about the price of pride and prejudice. The question now was whether anyone would survive long enough to benefit from that lesson. The emergency session of the Human Senate was unlike anything in recent history. Representatives from every human colony and Earth itself had gathered to debate a question that would define humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The chamber buzzed with tension as senators argued about whether to answer the desperate pleas for help coming from alien governments across the galaxy. Senator Bill Thompson of the Mars colony stood at the podium, his voice carrying the anger that many humans felt. "They called us primitives," he said firmly. "They demanded we surrender our fleets and submit to their oversight. They treated us like children who needed to be controlled and contained. Now they want us to save them from their own mistakes." Murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. Many senators nodded their heads, remembering the humiliation of the peace talks and the arrogant demands of alien leaders who had refused to treat humanity as equals. "Why should we risk human lives for beings who would have enslaved us?" Thompson continued. "Let them face the consequences of their actions. Let them learn what happens when you reject the friendship of those who could have been your greatest allies." Senator Carol Martinez of the Europa Station rose to respond. Her voice was calm but carried the moral weight that had made her one of the most respected voices in human government. "Senator Thompson speaks of consequences and justice," she said. "But I ask you to consider what kind of people we want to be." The chamber grew quiet as Martinez walked to the center of the floor. "Yes, they rejected us. Yes, they insulted us. Yes, they treated us with contempt and arrogance. But does that mean we should become the monsters they claimed we were?" She gestured to the display screens showing images of alien refugees fleeing burning worlds. "These are not the politicians who rejected our friendship. These are innocent families, children, civilians who had no voice in their government's decisions. Are we going to punish them for their leaders' mistakes?" The debate continued for hours with passionate arguments on both sides. Some senators spoke of human honor and the duty to protect the innocent. Others talked about national security and the danger of helping enemies who might turn against humanity again in the future. Finally, President Helen Carter took the podium. The chamber fell silent as she looked out at the representatives of humanity's scattered colonies and homeworld. Her decision would carry the weight of history. "I have listened to all of your arguments," she said quietly. "Both sides speak truth. The aliens did reject us, insult us, and try to force us into submission. We owe them nothing by law or treaty." She paused and looked at the images of suffering alien civilians. "But we are not defined by what others owe us. We are defined by who we choose to be when tested. Today we are being tested." Carter's voice grew stronger. "We will help them. Not because they deserve it, but because innocent people are dying and we have the power to save them. We will help them because that is who we are." The vote was close, but Carter's leadership carried the day. The Senate authorized military intervention to stop the hegemony's genocidal campaign, but with strict conditions. Humanity would act on its own terms, with its own objectives and under its own command. Structure. Admiral Morrison received his orders while the UES, Independence, was still monitoring the destruction of Zephyria Prime. Operation Shepherd was authorized to begin immediately. The human fleet, which the aliens had demanded be dismantled, emerged from hidden bases throughout human space. The ships that appeared were like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. During the months of isolation, human engineers had worked around the clock to upgrade their technology. The new vessels were faster, more heavily armed, and equipped with defensive systems that made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. Captain Tony Rodriguez commanded the first battle group as it jumped into the Zephyrian system. His ships materialized out of hyperspace in perfect formation, appearing between the hegemony fleet and the burning planet below. The enemy had expected no interference in their genocide. "Hegemony fleet, this is Captain Rodriguez of the Human Defense Force," he broadcast on all frequencies. "You will cease your bombardment immediately and withdraw from this system." Fleet Admiral Korth responded with contempt. "Humans have no authority here. This system is under hegemony control. Withdraw or be destroyed." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal. After that, we will consider you hostile and act accordingly." The hegemony admiral laughed over the communication channel. "You bring 12 ships against our 50. Your species truly is as foolish as we believed." 29 seconds. Rodriguez replied calmly. Korth cut the communication and ordered his fleet to attack. Hegemony warships turned their massive guns toward the human vessels. Confident that their superior numbers would make quick work of the intruders, they were wrong. The human ships moved like dancers, their improved engines allowing them to dodge incoming fire, while returning devastating volleys of their own. New human weapons tore through hegemony shields as if they were made of paper. Advanced targeting systems allowed human gunners to hit vital systems with surgical precision. Within minutes, half the hegemony fleet was disabled or destroyed. The survivors found themselves surrounded by human ships that seemed to appear and disappear at will. Admiral Korth watched in horror as his massive fleet was systematically dismantled by a force 1/4 its size. Impossible, he whispered as another of his battleships exploded under human fire. Captain. Rodriguez opened the communication channel again. Admiral Korth, you have lost. Surrender now and your surviving crews will be treated according to galactic law. Continue fighting and we will destroy every ship in your fleet. The proud hegemony commander looked around his bridge at the reports of destruction pouring in from across his fleet. His tactical officers were staring at their screens in disbelief. The humans were not just winning, they were making it look easy. We surrender, Korth said through gritted teeth. But the human intervention was about more than just military victory. As hegemony ships limped away from Zephyria Prime, human rescue vessels descended to the planet's surface. Emergency medical teams treated wounded civilians regardless of their species. Human engineers worked to repair damaged infrastructure, while the planet was still under bombardment. Human logistics officers organized refugee evacuations with an efficiency that amazed alien observers. Major Lisa Connor coordinated the relief effort from the surface of Zephyria Prime. She had been trained as a military officer, but her current mission was purely humanitarian. Her teams worked alongside alien survivors to save lives and restore basic services to the devastated world. Major, we have a problem, reported Sergeant Kevin Walsh. The local government officials are demanding that we follow their evacuation priorities. They want to save the wealthy and important people first. Connor looked at the alien official who was gesturing angrily at her medics treating wounded civilians. The being was clearly from the upper class, his expensive clothing unmarked by the destruction around him. Tell the official that human forces follow human priorities, she said firmly. We treat the wounded first, children second, and everyone else in order of need. Wealth and status are not medical conditions. The alien official sputtered in outrage, but Connor ignored him. She had her orders from President Carter herself. Human aid would be given based on need, not politics. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as human forces intervened in system after system. They did not come as conquerors or as allies of any particular alien government. They came as protectors of innocent life, following their own moral code regardless of alien politics or social hierarchies. The message was clear to everyone watching. Humanity had returned to galactic affairs, but they were doing it on their own terms. They owed nothing to the alien governments that had rejected them, but they would not allow genocide to continue on their watch. The galaxy was learning a new lesson about the species they had tried to contain. Humans were indeed capable of terrible violence when provoked, but they were also capable of incredible compassion when faced with suffering. They were not the monsters their enemies had claimed, nor were they the servants their former allies had wanted. They were something far more dangerous to tyrants and far more valuable to the innocent. They were free people who acted according to their own conscience, regardless of what others expected or demanded. 8 months after humanity began Operation Shepherd, the war against the hegemony finally ended. The last enemy stronghold fell to a combined fleet of human and alien ships working together for the first time in galactic history. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Independence, watching as Hegemony Fleet Admiral Korth signed the surrender documents that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The ceremony was broadcast live to every inhabited world, watched by billions of beings who had witnessed the transformation of their universe. The species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive barbarians now saw human ships as symbols of hope and protection. The beings who had demanded humanity's surrender now looked to human leadership for guidance in rebuilding their shattered civilizations. Fleet Admiral Korth, Morrison said formally, by your signature on these documents, the hegemony agrees to cease all aggressive actions, withdraw to your original territory, and submit to galactic oversight for a period of 50 years. Korth's scarred face showed the defeat he felt. His mighty fleet had been reduced to a handful of damaged ships. His empire of conquest had crumbled in the face of human military superiority and moral authority. "I sign," he said simply, his voice carrying none of the arrogance he had shown months earlier. As Korth's stylus moved across the surrender document, Morrison felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Victory in war was never as clean as the politicians made it seem. Too many beings had died, too many worlds had burned, too much trust had been broken for anyone to truly celebrate. But from the ashes of the old galactic order, something new was being born. The peace conference that followed was held not in some neutral alien station, but in Geneva on Earth. The symbolism was intentional and powerful. The species that had been excluded from galactic civilization now hosted the negotiations that would determine the galaxy's future. Representatives from every surviving government traveled to humanity's homeworld to participate in writing the new galactic charter. President Carter walked through the halls of the United Nations building, greeting alien dignitaries who had once viewed her species with contempt. The transformation in their attitudes was remarkable. Where once there had been arrogance and condescension, now there was respect and even gratitude. Prime Minister Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire approached her with slow, careful movements. The insect leader who had once demanded humanity's submission now moved like a being who had learned the true meaning of humility. His homeworld bore the scars of hegemony bombardment, and his people owed their survival to human intervention. "President Carter," he said, his translator making his voice sound even more mechanical than usual, "I must speak with you privately." Carter nodded and led him to a quiet conference room overlooking Lake Geneva. Through the windows, they could see human and alien children playing together in the gardens below, a sight that would have been impossible just a year earlier. "I owe you an apology," Veltar began, "not just for my government's actions, but for my personal behavior during the peace talks. We saw your weapons and called you violent. We failed to see your restraint. We saw your expansion and called you aggressive. We failed to see your protection of others. We saw your differences and called you primitive. We failed to see your innovation." Carter listened without interruption as the proud alien leader continued. "You could have let us burn when the hegemony attacked. You could have conquered us when we were weak. Instead, you saved us and offered us partnership. We understand now what we rejected." The president's response would become one of the most quoted speeches in galactic history. "Prime Minister Veltar, we did not save you to rule you. We saved you because that is who we are. We do not seek subjects or vassals. We seek friends, partners, and allies in building something better than what came before." Chancellor Crix of the Altarian Republic joined the conversation, his blue scales shifting to colors that indicated deep shame. "President Carter, my people have prepared a formal statement acknowledging our errors in judgment. We wish to make amends for our treatment of humanity during the failed negotiations." Carter shook her head gently. "The past is past, Chancellor. What matters now is what we build together for the future." The new galactic charter that emerged from the Geneva conference was unlike anything that had existed before. Instead of a council of major powers dictating terms to smaller species, the new government was based on principles of equality and mutual respect. Every species, regardless of size or military strength, would have an equal voice in galactic affairs. Dr. Lisa Hamilton, now serving as Director of Galactic Relations, worked closely with alien diplomats to draft the document's key provisions. The charter established mutual defense agreements, trade partnerships based on fairness rather than exploitation, and cultural exchange programs that celebrated diversity rather than demanding conformity. Article 7 establishes the principle of sovereign development. Hamilton explained to a mixed audience of human and alien representatives, no species may interfere in another's internal affairs or demand changes to their society as a condition of membership. Ambassador Grace Johnson, who had witnessed the collapse of the old order and the birth of the new, added her own perspective. This charter recognizes what the old Galactic Council never understood. Unity does not require uniformity. We can work together while remaining true to ourselves. The signing ceremony took place in the same chamber, where the United Nations had once struggled to maintain peace on Earth. Now it hosted the birth of a truly galactic community based on cooperation rather than domination. As each species representative signed the charter, Admiral Morrison watched from the gallery. The military officer who had walked away from the original peace talks now saw his decision vindicated. By refusing to accept subordination, humanity had forced the galaxy to confront its own prejudices and build something better. 5 years later, Dr. Hamilton walked through New Geneva Spaceport on Luna, watching the daily miracle of galactic civilization at work. The massive station served as a hub for trade, travel, and cultural exchange between dozens of species. Human and alien families moved through the corridors together, their children playing games that mixed traditions from across the galaxy. At Gate 12, she watched a human engineer named Captain Sarah Davis explain jump drive technology to a group of eager alien students. The same technology that aliens had once dismissed as crude human engineering was now being shared freely as part of the new galactic partnership. The key to efficient hyperspace navigation, Davis was saying, is understanding that space and time are not separate things but part of a single fabric that can be folded. A young Zephyrian in the group raised his hand. Captain Davis, how did humans discover this principle? Davis smiled. Through centuries of asking questions that others said were impossible to answer. That is what exploration means. Not just traveling to new places, but thinking new thoughts. Hamilton felt a deep satisfaction as she watched the scene. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength was never their weapons or their technology. It was their refusal to accept limitations, their willingness to help others, and their ability to see potential where others saw only problems. The failed peace talks had taught everyone involved a valuable lesson. Strength without compassion was tyranny. Compassion without strength was helplessness. But strength and compassion working together could build something that neither could achieve alone. As Hamilton boarded her ship for another diplomatic mission, she reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this point. Humanity had walked away from peace talks that would have made them servants. In doing so, they had forced the galaxy to learn what real peace looked like. It was not the peace of submission or the peace of conquest. It was the peace of equals working together toward common goals while respecting their differences. It was the peace that came when the strong chose to protect the weak rather than exploit them. The galaxy had wanted to cage humanity's potential. Instead, they had learned that humanity's true power lay in lifting others up alongside them. From the ashes of failed negotiations had risen something far greater than anyone had imagined possible. In the end, humanity had not just walked away from peace talks. They had walked toward a better kind of peace entirely,